This is IBM Museum. I've had a lot go on today, but I wanted to do a video on a rather uncommon CPU upgrade. And these are known as the clip over. And I've got one sitting on top of this Model 3286. Which has a Kingston 386 now upgrade on it. So I guess it's a 3386, and I'm trying to make it a Model 3486. These CPUs, and I have a batch of them. That's not what I wanted. That's a prior video of the software I was looking for. I still haven't had anybody reply. This is what I wanted to show. So I have a batch of 6 of these, and of course on the left front is the top side of it, and over on the right is the clip over socket, and this goes on a 386SX CPU. Clips right over the top of it. And there's a lot of things in this video that the little side details I'm going to cover in addition to the CPU, a little bit of the machine that I'm doing, and I've just tried to be as prepared as I can for what may crop up on this. But it's a rather rare CPU upgrade, and I saw a video from CPU Galaxy. Had a recent video on it was a 286 stack basically that had cache that would be added, and then a separate CPU that was a 386 SX that seated inside of one of the 286 sockets, and it was just a straight CPU. Didn't really and really wasn't marked for a brand or anything else as far as that upgrade. To find what upgraded the cache on either of those assemblies. And there was a comment that talked about, hey, what happens when you stack those, and maybe you could get something to work. Now, as I said, the Model 3286 that I have behind me, and I'll go through, get the right things turned on here. No, not that one. Okay. That one. Okay. My sources were jumping around on me a little bit. And and I've got this open case because it's just this Frankenstein monster right now. And I do have the camcorder above it that I showed that the 46 CPU I'm looking at, and of course it's on the monitor behind me as well, that this has, I'll probably stay on the webcam picture here because I've got these memory boards in here, and it's this old, in fact I might go through and I might move around. I've got the camcorder zoomed out, and I've got it more prepared for the when the CPU is in there, and I'm having my doubts. I may have to put these memory boards back in there, just so I can see kind of the performance under Windows as well. And so I've got this memory board that actually 2 memory boards, one with a multi-IO, and then it's got memory that takes the planar memory, which is I only have a megabyte in 4 slots. It's 256 KB per slot. It's even some of the old Sugar Cube style memory. Really unusual. Yeah, I'll just adjust back the boom. But I've got that in these slots. This lower card, and it's a full length card, and the upgrade is below this, the Kingston upgrade. And I'll show that in a moment. It's been in prior videos, but I'll show it once again. This full-length memory board goes from that 1 megabyte to the 4 megabyte, so it gives the machine 4 megabyte of memory. And then this big honkin' humongous, and that's why the cover's off, is because it has an edge that protrudes out. Doesn't even have a back bracket for this card. And I featured this on a prior video, and I even have a wooden dowel spacer below, just to go through and hold that in the right position. So this takes it to the full 16 megabytes that a system of a 286 CPU or a 386SX is able to address of regular and extended memory. And so it just maxes out the RAM that is on the system. And I don't want to adjust any of the switch settings. I made up a reference diskette. It's time to kind of, let's go through, and that's that short little wooden dowel that I've got as a spacer. Set that back over here. So I've got just this Frankenstein part where it's a more modern PS2 style pinout drive that I've got in place on the 1.44 diskette drive, because this is, I had problems with some of my diskette drives, and this is an easy way just to pin compatible with the older PS2 drives, just to plug it in and have a functional drive. So I've got the bezel cover off. It's a slimline drive, almost like what's on the L40SX. And I made up a starter diskette for the mold, just in case I have to run it with changing the memory around, because I'll have to run the config from the starter diskette to adjust for that memory. So I have the starter diskette handy, even though in a way I've kind of liked to run the memory boards in there, even though they'll cover that CPU upgrade and not really show it for the video. I'll show when I put it on the system, seat it in place and everything else, but it'd be hidden when the computer is in operation. And then on the other side, also the bezel cover is removed for this hard drive. This is one of the proprietary drives. It's a 45 megabyte hard drive, and I've featured it before. I'll actually have to maneuver around because I haven't changed around the start sequence. It goes through and runs a batch file, and we may have to kind of work with that, I guess is the way to say it, because I do have the Kingston files for that 386SX now loaded on the machine, but they don't automatically start up. And it wants to go through and run a network configuration, and then it goes through and running Windows. So you exit Windows, and it goes to DOS shell. Yeah, it's just we'll see if we can terminate the batch job and see exactly what that does. I also have the landmark of just a version 2, not the version 6, that, updated that program a little bit. The appearance is basically the same. Probably a little bit more accurate in some cases in regards to like the FPU speed. Landmark can really that can be out to lunch. But we don't have an FPU on this machine, so that floating point, upgrade. And I'll talk about that a little bit of what the upgrade paths are for that. Now the 45 megabyte, this is also was released in the late in the model 3286 lifetime, and it replaced, initially the model 3286 had the 20 megabyte drive like the original model 30, and a 30 megabyte drive. And then this 45 megabyte, you had to have the latest BIOS and everything else to run this in the drive. And so it was it was the largest proprietary drive offered for the PS2 MUL30 26, and conceivably for the MUL25 26, since that shares the same planars. We've gone over a little bit before that this is a Type 1 planar. It's got the 40-pin EEPROM, and then there's a Type 2 planar that has two 28-pin EEPROMs, and then there's minor changes to the planar. Those Type 1 and Type 2 run about the same speed. I'll later on in a later video, I may go through and kind of benchmark them against each other, the Type 1 and the Type 2, just to kind of see if there happens to be a performance difference. And Louis Oland is on the SIF News group, and he's found even a notification that IBM did talking about the Type 2 planar, the planar that came after this, also going through and grounding one of the pins on the mouse port. And that's even that may be a way to go through and kind of diagnose which one you have. I'm going through from the Type 1 and Type 2, looking at date codes and kind of from the Kingston upgrade manual, that 286 CPU and the socket, between the Type 1 and Type 2, it's 90 degrees worth of difference for the CPU orientation. And that Kingston manual, that's not IBM talking about, so I'm relatively certain about the Type 1 and Type 2 placement, but checking that grounded pin of the mouse port, that's going to take us a little bit further. Now, the last little bit on this tangent of tangents is that the 45 megabyte, I've learned from another person on the Facebook group. We cover the MUL25 and MUL30s in the group. He talks about where he was able to get the last BIOS version for the 8086 CPU-based MUL30 to run these drives as well. He wasn't able to get it to run until he updated the BIOS. And that's an interesting aside for me. I plan to go through, and I wanted to even test the original MUL25 and find out what sizes of drives it's able to do and whether it's able to handle that 45 megabyte drive. So we're going to get through all the side tangents here, get to where we can look at the actual CPU upgrade. Now I'm going to go through and I'll put these memory cards back because I want to go through and I want to have a baseline of the way it's set up. I was working with this earlier, and I'll have to look at, I'm relatively certain of the chip orientation, but it'd be nice to also see these labels off the Kingston upgrade. And of course, the Dallas chip has been modified. I've got this little lead for the battery out. And that was the critical thing with the with this type of module for the MUL30 26 and MUL25 26 is that the Dallas real-time clock chip module, they had to make an adjustment to fit for that. And as I say, this with between the Type 1 and Type 2 planars changing, in the Type 2 orientation, it's out this way. It pivots on this corner, but this board is actually, 90 degrees. The orientation changes 9 degrees this way to still miss that Dallas real-time clock chip module, which would be on this face of the upgrade daughter card. And that sits above the planar, sits in the 286 socket, is just right below this big chip. And this does have cache on it. It has a little program that enables the cache. And I've got that loaded, that software loaded and everything. And the reason I got thinking about the kind of the stacking the CPU, so to speak, is this clip over CPU. It doesn't do any clock multiplying inside it. And it's a Texas Instrument chip. It's a TI 486 SLC/E. And it's rated at 33 megahertz. Now it would go through, the thought is it would go through and just clip over to whatever speed of 386SX that you had, and up to 33 megahertz, which is, you know, Intel had some very rare models of the 386SX that went up to 33 megahertz. So they typically stopped. The more common is 16, 20, and 25 megahertz. And AMD did go up to 33 megahertz. And then I think they even had a 40 megahertz model as well that was just that upper end of the 386SX type. And this Kingston module has a 33 megahertz 386SX. So the clip over, this is also going to run at 33 megahertz, just like it's rated. Now, one of the upgrades I can look at in the future is I don't have that FPU. Intel, in their little upgrade the same way, they didn't have a socket for a 387SX or 387SL to go in this to go in a socket like this. They just had to where the 287 chip was able to be populated here. The board was a little bit different. Didn't go over where this 287 processor would go. So in a future video, I may go through and the FPU angles to look at, because there's even a couple variations there of that, an older core or newer core that I can go through and explain when we get to that as well. And I even meant to go by, because I do have a 387SL, but I think it's 25 megahertz. And I have it on an L40SX. And I wanted to go through, and this day has just been so busy that I wanted to pick it up and kind of look at it, because I have run those at 25% overclocking. So running a 16 megahertz at 20 megahertz, running at 20 megahertz at 25 megahertz, running 25 at 33, so on and so forth. And that doesn't necessarily harm. I haven't had any issues with running those FPUs at 25% overclock. But once we have this in place, you know, this will just clip over the top of this. Now, I do say I've got the cache software for the Kingston upgrade. This is a model that kind of was initially came out from Texas Instruments that had just a small amount of cache, 1 KB of cache that's on this chip that typically it would have software to enable that, or where it modifies the registers. There's what's called mall specific registers that are modified and turn that cache on. I don't have the software for that. I may have to locate it. Someone is more familiar with these CPUs. I mean, I'm sure it's out there and been archived, but they can speak up in the comments of the video too. But this is going to clip over, and then you know, I had to watch because that comes really close to that bottom slot. You know, I don't have any adapter in that bottom slot, but I do have this big full-length memory board in slot 2, and that will clear once that CPU is clipped in there properly. That should clear the bottom edge, so I can have that board beneath there and running when we come to that part. And then, of course, the big memory board that I have over here sitting on top of the power supply, goes in that very top slot. So we should have clearance and everything else. I did want that exposed. At one point, I may go through a configuration, just modifying how the hard drive loads up, and we'll have to see what we encounter, because I do have my infrared thermometer as well, and I'd like to check that temperature of even the Kingston CPU, seeing what it's running at there, and see what this chip is running at when it's in place. But that's a minor point of this video. I don't know if we'll necessarily get to that particular aspect. So we'll set that aside. Let me get this out of the way. We'll go through. We will reseat. I'll get the positioning guides in the right places. And on this 45 megabyte hard drive, I'm also getting a little bit of stiction problems, like I may have explained in the original video. And that is where the drive sitting in there just doesn't spin up when you apply power. And so it was giving me like a 1701 error, which is hard drive. And so I took it out, and I was doing the wrist twist exercise, and that's where I'm going through and just with the assembly of trying to free up the platters being stuck to the heads. And apparently when this thing sits for periods of time, it that motor just doesn't. And it may be that I'm going through and I got so much on this power supply that it may just be loading it down too heavily or something like that. But it'd be nice maybe as well. I wanted to get this board. I wanted to go through and make an adapter down below so I can get 4 megabytes on the planar memory, and then go through and I would have the ability to pull out this full-length board. And then this one, I'd actually like to get a reverse slot and mount it over, but there's not enough room in this void to the PSU, and so maybe I'll get a more compact power supply. They call them Pico PSUs. That just is a modern adaptation, very small in this case, just to get more space in there. Not that the power supply has failed. I do have other spare power supplies for these units, but just to get a smaller physical size for that unit, so I can go through and make a kind of a custom memory mounting module. And I should have gone through and switched over, because let's go through. I'm going to do some adaptations here. I've got to do some switching over on my source. And I'll probably have to do some repositioning. Should get this reporting that there's no signal. Yeah. Okay. And let me get this in the right positioning for the screen. It's going to be coming up. And let's get this thing on, because I know, just a final once over, everything looks good. I do even have the tweener machine next to it that I went through and built the reference diskette. It's still powered up and kind of running quietly there. Okay, why are we not seeing... VGA. Maybe I'm still enough out of position here. Okay. Because, I mean, you heard the click of when I powered the machine up. But this memory count is going to take a very long time to go up to that almost 16 megabyte of RAM. I should have started this a little bit earlier. And under normal circumstances, I'd go through and I'd pause the video too. I think we can go through from the completion here. Once I get the CPU in place and I'll move along. I know that there's a lot of side tangents I went through at the start of the video. That kind of caused a lot of delays getting to this point. And you guys are just, man, just get to benchmarking the baseline system and showing what it is with the CPU. And okay. And I think I showed this hard drive before. The contents, there's kind of some neato contents in the Windows 3.0 that's on there. And since I do have the Kingston board in there, it does, and the memory, it runs it in 386 enhanced mode, Windows 3.0, so that's pretty well there. Get the keyboard. Just to get prepared. And I'll probably let it run through the Windows. And the interesting thing is the Windows, it doesn't have that. As I say, I don't go through and automatically enable the cache on the Kingston module, which is that is what adds the performance to that upgrade. So even Windows, when it runs initially, it's not going to have that enabled. So maybe I can run Windows and step out, enable the cache settings, step into Windows, step back out, and get all the baseline from the landmark set up. I didn't look too much at the hard drive. I hope the hard drive is going to spin up and behave. Yeah, that looks good. Just extended setting time, that hard drive gives it the, oh, okay. So it does have the problem. Okay, so I'm going to pause the video and I'll get the hard drive going and then be right back with you. Okay, and that did take pulling it out and some more wrist twist exercises and a few power cycles to get the motor to spin up. And so this drive is just not happy. I hope that it's going to go through and boot and, you know, continue to work for this video at least. And then I'd like to have future videos where I test it against some systems to find out if they'll recognize it. And it's pretty evident once you power on. I mean, hearing the motor spin up, and even before it goes through all the memory count and gives you that 1701 error. Now I'm going to get prompted initially here. Okay. All the stuff loading. And I'm going to say, I'm actually going to do a control break because beyond even the network, I don't want to, oh, okay, because it continued. I didn't get to it quick enough. Let's do it just a control delete. See if that, because now we're going to end up waiting through all the network warning. It's not going to find the token ring board, I think, that it was looking for. I should have been a little bit more on the ball. Okay, I'm going to pause and get back to this prompt after I do a power cycle, because I'm not able to break into the system here. Okay, so we're going to the same prompt here. And rather than get fancy, I'm just going to say no. And it's going to go through and it'll start Microsoft Windows. And go through and I'll just make some minor adjustments on the screen. And we see that IBM background as it is. And of course, that's normally hidden with all the things up in Program Manager. Okay. And so, and as I say, this is without the Kingston software running yet. So we're going to go through and it starts up DOS shell on the exit of Windows. And maybe I need to go through and just do some work with the menus of this system, because it goes through and it has to read all the directories and all that. Okay. So at least I do have a mouse driver loaded, but I'm using my knee as a mouse pad. Okay, so we're to the C prompt, and this is a rather abbreviated prompt, but we'll go through and we'll change directory to the Kingston. Okay, just do a brief directory. We've got the speed batch file. Run that first. And that goes through and it doesn't do the splash screen or test the video initially. So it's quite good. So below scale, and you can see almost at 7 megahertz, it identifies it correctly as an Intel, well, not necessarily, it's an AMD 386 SX. But I mean, for all intents and purposes, AMD is going to be very close to the Intel side, and running at 10 megahertz. So it's running at the planar frequency of the MUL 3286. Okay, we're going to go escape to exit. We're going to run the KTC cache, and we do a -E to enable. Okay, it tells us the cache is enabled. We're going to go through and do the speed batch file again. Okay, now it has it identified as CPU clock 33 megahertz. And so we can see that quite higher reading and doing the 46.76 megahertz. And even for, so it's performing like a 47 megahertz IBM AT is what it's saying. And let's even look at how ultimately should run Windows faster. Adjusting that window a little bit more. Okay. And so did that well. And this has the old version of, I didn't want to run it Windows because it'll go through and it won't run correctly. This has, I didn't realize there's an older version of the Microsoft Diagnostic. This version 1, and goes through, and it has a screen kind of, still full screen, but it has it arranged a little bit different ways. And I was actually amazed, and to me it does a little bit better job. It almost looks like that system information tool in a way for the some of the identifiers it does there. And talks about browsing the BIOS memory area. Things like that. And we can look at the processor, and it just identifies it as 8386. Identifies the coprocessors are not there, but rather generic. Doesn't even do a frequency or anything like that. So we're going to go through. We will okay. Go to exit. So we are to the point we're going to try and push on that clip over. And you can get to the point. I'll get ready for the camcorder coming back up. But let's go through. Let's get in front of the system. We're going to go through power it down. I'll switch back over to the HDMI input. Okay. Now, I don't want to have it off for too long because I don't want that stiction on the hard drive again. And try not to set these capacitors on the circuit board with the capacitors on any metal to short things out or anything like that. This label's loose, so I'll probably go through and move it aside. Now, I'm not sure. I don't want to necessarily pull this out of the socket and go through and reseat, but I want to get to where we have enough. Now, interesting enough, these will, I talked about it working with up to a 33 megahertz 386 SX. Now, the initial 386 SX, Intel didn't really do what's called the float pin too well on those. And it went through and it didn't disable the CPU correctly. So you had to have even a later 386 SX to function correctly. Okay, and that feels like it's seated real good. Get out of the shadow here, and there's some labels and stuff like that, but that's clipped over those leads, those 386 SX leads. So let's get the memory boards, and I may go through and, well, we'll see how quickly. I want to see if that, I mean, the memory count coming up in the first place shows us the CPU is working correctly and all that. Who knows? I mean, we'll leave that element of surprise. I hope I don't have any issues here, and that these do work. You know, I haven't tested any of this stuff before. As preparation, I'm just riding by the seat of my pants. Everything looks like it's in place real good. Nothing, so trial by fire here. Let's get back to the VGA. Okay. We'll do a 4x3. Oh, and I had the camcorder up on the screen that I was looking at, but didn't show it for you guys. But maybe you got enough of a view to see. Okay, and we will go to that. We will go to our just to get that in the right position, and let's get powered up. Okay, I didn't hear, and the hard drive blinks in a particular sequence too. I didn't hear the hard drive spin up once again. Oh. No, it's not. And it makes that initial noise, and then the light blinks, as you're seeing. So I go through, and this is, you know, sketchy for every time you try it. The stiction, you go through and do the wrist twist, and you're trying to get that the platters free of the heads, and get that motor to where it has enough oomph to start up. Come on. Now, I'm not seeing any RAM count either, which is problematic for that. Okay. So what I'm going to do here, of course, we didn't see whether there's any smoke that may have came up or anything like that. Hopefully not. I don't smell anything. Okay, I'm going to try with the boards pulled out of there. And okay. So this will give you enough view of what I did to and I'm relatively certain of that pin 1 position and everything by the slope. That, let's see if this is a power issue. Yeah, hard drive is still not wanting to spin up. Okay, get everything. Of course, even if I get the hard drive to spin up, then I don't have the memory boards in there now. Okay, and that CPU is I should see a memory count. We went all that way and we saw okay. So I'm going to pull okay. Okay. The hard drive is still not spinning up. We have memory count now. And it gave us a memory failure. Okay. We are going to go through I want to yeah. I mean, we can see the print there. And then the pin 1 position. Which you've got correctly. The print should be the same between both chips. I mean, I'm hoping these are functional and seated properly. I'm pulling out another one just to I mean, we apparently have to do our troubleshooting steps one at a time here. Oh, and there's some pins. They're misplaced. I hope that we do not have problems with these. And then going through and putting them on. And I mean, the clip over style, there was problems with that. Anyway, yeah, and I do not like how that is seems to be displacing in the top of the package for the AMD should be the same as the Intel. Man, I just don't like how okay, there we have a RAM count. But we don't have the hard drive spin up, and I suppose otherwise I have to put something on diskette There we go with the hard drive. But then we don't have the RAM count. Okay, we're getting the hard drive pretty regular now. But not the oh yeah. And this is just making an absolute mess of these pins. And I do not want to ruin these. I mean, I would think that the AMD packaging would be the same physical size. But again, these clip overs were just so finicky. And that's the reason I don't want to displace the, yeah, and see that's bent. I don't want to go through and damage. And there wasn't any special tool or anything else. I'm trying to put it on straight. Our hard drive is working good. At least that didn't displace. Any pins. And there's the hard drive acting up again. And the CPU not coming up. Yeah, that's not. At least on this attempt, this one is not. The pins aren't going out of position or anything like that, like I saw with some of the others that I have. But yeah, it was not a very good, the 386 SX did not really have a grand upgrade path. Okay. And I don't want to go through and ruin my Kingston board either. This is just doing okay. Even going through and re-seeing these plastic leaded chip carrier 286 sockets is okay. Hard drive didn't come up, memory count didn't come up. I wish there was a good way to go through and of the 6 that I received of these guys, on which there may have been pulls that were bad anyway. The pins for that look like it's been they're doing well. I mean, there's, and it looks worse on camera than it does in person. This one seems like it has a plastic bit. It's out there. So this video may not have a good completion tonight, and it's over an hour of recording time. I realized that this would be kind of sketchy with these clip over upgrades. Seeing that some of these pins got messed up, and I hope those can be repaired. This has And they got at least one displace pin. And I don't know why on that one that looked like it seated correctly, but didn't work. Yeah, I should have quit with when I noticed that the pins were getting displaced on some of these. Yee. So that may take a little bit of delicate work to get that going. I want to make sure that my Kingston module still works. And now it's giving me no signal. So this has been a wonderful exercise in futility. And I do not like reseating that over and over and over again. That's why I wanted to put that clip in. And it just... Yep. Hard drive's not spinning up. No memory count now from the Kingston up. That's just a little bit of dirt. I mean, those pins still look good. And it almost goes to the point of trying an original 286 CPU in there to see if I can even get the planer to work anymore. So this is called when things go horribly wrong. Had enough of these clip overs that I thought I'd move through them and could, if one didn't work, I'd check the next one. And I don't even have the original system working now. It's not a matter of even just the hard drive refusing to spin up. This CPU update took a really south turn. But I think I have enough good content. I mean, a warning. I mean, I have videos that they don't have to be a success story. to be a learning experience. And I have to see how I can recover from this to get the original configuration working again on the machine, and then decide if I want to try and test these clip over upgrades any further. So if you enjoyed seeing this, just me going down in flames, click on that like button to at least give the mutual support of me having things go wrong. And subscribe to my channel. You'll see content like this. You'll see some videos that just these old machines. And recommend this channel to your friends so we can get more subscriber base. But I think that's a good place to end this video tonight. This is IBM Museum. Thank you.